We begin in the Middle East, where there is a war of words over the act of war itself. This is the face of what could be a new frontier in relations between two of the region's most powerful and most polarized nations. It is the war in Yemen. And it's the reason why tensions between Saudi Arabia and Iran are ramping up. The Saudi Crown Prince is accusing Tehran of, quote, direct military aggression by supplying missiles to rebels there. That's something Iran denies, but given that a ballistic missile was intercepted near the Saudi capital over the weekend, the timing and the nature of this statement speaks volumes. Well, our correspondents are here to explain all sides of this story. We have our Ben Wedeln live for us in Beirut, while Fred Pleitgen has just come back from Tehran and joins us from Moscow. Good to have you both with us. I want to start with Ben. We've seen this sharp escalation in rhetoric between these two rival nations. Just take a listen to what the Saudi Foreign Minister told our Becky Anderson a short time ago.
With regards to the missile that landed, was launched on Saudi territory, it was an Iranian missile launched by Hezbollah from territory occupied by the Houthis in Yemen. The missile is very similar to a missile that was launched in July at the town of Yanbu. It was manufactured in Iran. It was disassembled and smuggled into parts into Yemen, and it was assembled in Yemen by operatives from the Revolutionary Guards and from Hezbollah, and then it was launched against Saudi Arabia. This is what happened. We see this as an act of war. Iran cannot lob missiles at Saudi cities and towns and expect us not to take steps vis-a-vis Iran.
Ben, Saudi Arabia, they're saying not only is this an act of war, but they will take appropriate measures when the time is right. How serious is this?
Well, it's certainly serious, and obviously this is the first time that a ballistic missile, has been fired all the way to Riyadh from the Yemeni border, which is hundreds of kilometers away. Now, it's important to stress that the war in Yemen, it began back in March of 2015, and via proxy, perhaps, between the pro-government forces and the Houthi rebels, who are supported by Iran, as opposed to the government, which is supported by Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries. These hostilities have been going on for a while. Obviously, the use of a ballistic missile of this sort definitely ratchets up the tensions quite a lot. Now, we don't know about the precise details of where the Houthis got this missile and who assembled it, who smuggled it into the country, but this definitely does represent a serious change in the level of hostilities in the war in Yemen that's been going on, as I said, for quite some time.
And Ben, of course, the Lebanese Prime Minister fled Lebanon, heading to Saudi Arabia, where he announced his resignation. He blamed Iran and also said he feared for his life. What's the status on his situation now? He has left Riyadh.
Well, we understood he left Riyadh and went to Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates, where he is meeting with leaders there. And of course, the UAE and Saudi Arabia are both quite hostile to Iran and to Hezbollah. Now, we don't know his specific status at the moment. Now, speaking to people in Lebanon, many of them do believe he is under some sort of Saudi control, if not detention, even though he is traveling around. We did see yesterday that he did meet with King Salman of Saudi Arabia. But here is a Beirut newspaper. This is Al Akhbar, which is a paper that leans in the direction of Hezbollah. It says Hariri under detention. And certainly, if you would listen to the speech by Hassan Nasrallah, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, their belief is that in some way that Hariri is not free to act. Nasrallah said that Hariri was basically reading a statement when he declared his resignation that was dictated to him by Saudi officials. And the government of Lebanon seems to be taking the attitude that until Hariri returns to Beirut, and there's no indications at this point when that will be, they will not consider his resignation as official.
All right, Ben Wedeln for us. I want to go to Fred. Tensions, of course, clearly intensifying between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And just after Becky's exclusive interview, Iran responded calling the Saudi allegations, quote, stupid, baseless and fully false. Now, Iran and Saudi Arabia have also always been pitted against each other. But do these strong statements indicate storm clouds brewing? Could this war of words turn into an actual war?
Well, I think that we're still pretty far away from a direct confrontation, militarily at least, between these two countries. That certainly would involve a lot more. And quite frankly, if it did come to a real war between Iran and Saudi Arabia, you would almost certainly see other major players in that region get involved almost immediately, including countries like Iraq, like Lebanon also, where Ben is right now, and then also, of course, the United States as well. So I think we're still pretty far from a scenario like that. But you are right, the situation is really heating up. And what's also in danger of heating up very much is these wars by proxy, like the one that we're seeing in Yemen, like, for instance, also some of the things that we're seeing in Syria as well. And then, of course, also the war of words. You have seen certainly the Saudis ratchet up their rhetoric towards the Iranians, and the Iranians themselves are following suit. They not only said that they think that these allegations are baseless that are being made against them regarding this ballistic missile, but they're also saying that they don't even have the means to smuggle ballistic missiles into Yemen. That's not something that they say that they even can do, because, of course, it does involve bringing these things over there by boat over a waterway, and there is a naval blockade in place. They also say that they believe that a lot of the things that they accuse the Saudis of doing in the Middle East region are failing. They say they accuse the Saudis of stoking terrorism in the Middle East. They say they're the ones that are fighting terrorism. So you really have these two countries levying these allegations against one another. And I think one of the most important things that's happened, and there's actually a great op-ed by Ben that people should read on our website, is the one thing that's gone away is the common enemy, which is ISIS, which is on the verge of being defeated in the Middle East. And with that, you have these two countries that have distrusted one another for a very, very long period of time, all of a sudden going at it head-to-head, Lynda.
Frederick Pleitgen, great to get your perspective, having travelled and reported from Iran quite a few times. And, of course, Ben, thank you very much. As Fred mentioned, you wrote a great article on CNN.com where we want to send our viewers there. It's where he explores what the region's future might look like, especially now that the war against ISIS seems to be winding down. Again, just head to our website, CNN.com, for that. As ever, when there's turmoil in the kingdom, there's money to be made in crude oil, black gold as it's named. The price has been hitting a 2-year high, and Brent crude, of course, jumping up over $6 to $64 a barrel, up a touch over 3% there. But that relatively small percentage can translate into billions of extra dollars. It's not just that crude that's seeing its fortunes turn. Let's bring in CNN's John Defterios from Abu Dhabi to explain it all. John, we've obviously been talking about, just explain a little more why the region is so on edge right now.
Well, in fact, Lynda, I think with the oil price rise, and this is $8 now in the last month of trading alone, this is a risk back on scenario. And I think we have to put the Crown Prince's aggressive nature, whether it's at home domestically to crack down on corruption, or in the bigger picture, what he's doing regionally, into context. He believes that Saudi Arabia, for the last 5 or 6 years, has been rather dormant, particularly since his father took the throne, King Salman, in 2015. He moved from deputy crown prince to crown prince, has taken a very aggressive stance as defense minister before that. As Ben suggested, 2.5-year war in Yemen, that's going on much longer than they anticipated. But there are no signs of him backing down. I was sitting in an off-the-record briefing with him, no tone of saying, like, we're going to walk away from Yemen. They think it's the Arab line in the sand, and they don't like the influence of Iran in that space. Look at the Qatar economic embargo. It is a Saudi-led initiative. The UAE's well into it. They see Qatar today as a tiny dot into the Gulf right now that proves no threat to Saudi Arabia, even though Doha has gotten much closer to Tehran. And this dovetails right into his Vision 2030 plan here to reform the Saudi economy. It's the largest economy in the region, but it's been overly dependent on crude prices. And with this correction, he wants to help them diversify. He wants to modernize society, have a moderate Islam, let women drive in June 2018. And part of that promise, he says, if you're going to have Saudis paying higher taxes and tighten their belts and diversify, we can't have the royal family or prominent businessmen or ministers or former ministers stealing from the state. That's his view. He sees it almost as a key performance indicator on his own here to deliver on the promise, although many think he's trying to ratchet down and control power.
And John, just tell us about the financial scope of the arrests and detentions of these princes and government ministers and business leaders.
Lynda, I think it's extraordinary. The Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Riyadh, a palatial hotel that I was attending at this Future Investment Initiative less than a month ago, housing billionaires from Wall Street and London and other European capitals, is now the home to a number of different Saudi billionaires who are under arrest. And what we're talking about in terms of assets here is some $33 billion. Now, the most prolific of the investors from Saudi Arabia around the world is Prince Walid bin Talal. Of the $33 billion, about $17 billion rests with him. But that fortune is starting to drop, and dramatically over the last 3 days. Here's an interesting number. His stock for Kingdom Holdings is down better than 21% in the last 3 days alone. This has eroded his fortune by $2.1 billion. Now, internationally, the view is this is a purge of the powerful to make it easier for the Crown Prince to push forward his Vision 2030. Internally, and advisors to the Crown Prince suggest he has support of the youth. 70% of the population is under the age of 30. They think it's time to actually try to clean things up. Can he find a balance or not? And when does this end is a huge question. Yesterday, the Attorney General suggested this is phase 1 of the investigations, and that's coming to a close. For the international community, how many different phases do we have to go through before this rampant rush against corruption is finally over?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. They are certainly staying in the fanciest prison we've ever seen. All right, John Defterios.
Yes, for sure.
Good to have you with us.
Right.
Well, still to come, we are live on the US president's trip to Asia. He got a red carpet welcome in Seoul and then softened his usually tough talk on North Korea. We'll have details in just a moment.